We will never stand for the bombing and killing of babies in Gaza. Our opponents, may have won this round at this time in this place. But this will be a battle for our humanity and justice for the rest of our lives. God help us build a better world where everyone understands when we say free Palestine, it is not anti-Semitic.
Unfortunately, progressive Congressman Jamaal Bowman has officially lost his primary in a race that was flooded with pro-Israel money and spending, namely by AIPAC. Now, in fact, it was the most expensive House primary race in American history, drawing more than $25 million in ad spending. So let's get to some more of the details, because while I certainly do think that AIPAC made the difference here, Bowman was also a vulnerable candidate in this primary race, and I'll explain what I mean by that in just a moment. First, let's take a look at who Bowman was ousted by and what the results were. So he was ousted by Westchester County Executive George Latimer, who, with 84% of the votes counted, had received 58.4% of the vote. Bowman had 41.6% of the vote. Now, the squad member had been an outspoken critic of Israel and how they've been prosecuting this war in Gaza, and was referring to that war as a genocide, something that AIPAC, of course, does not take kindly to, since they represent not the best interests of the American people, but the best interests of a foreign government, Israel. And so at the start of the war, Bowman also alleged that there was no proof to back up claims that Hamas had used sexual violence on October 7th. He later walked that back and apologized after the UN had provided evidence. And because of his criticisms of that war, AIPAC spent an unprecedented amount of money in this race to make Bowman look as bad as possible. AIPAC spent at least $14.5 billion on anti-Bowman ads through its PAC, United Democracy Project, as of June 20th, and that's according to Federal Election Commission filings. And yesterday, as voting was underway, Bowman had some pretty strong words for AIPAC. Let's take a look.
Even as I've talked to voters, there are some who are like, I don't want to share who I voted for. I don't want my neighbors to know. It's got intense.
It's intense because AIPAC are bullies. AIPAC intimidates people. And my opponent has sided not just with AIPAC, but with Republican billionaires. And because he's been in office so long, and because he's been county executive giving people jobs, people are afraid.
Thanks for watching. Our audience has helped build TYT into the media giant it is today. Together, we can accomplish anything. Support our work and join us at tyt.com/team. Now, following Bowman's loss and Latimer's win, AIPAC released a statement on X, writing that they congratulate Latimer on his resounding victory over an anti-Israel detractor. I mean, it's just so ridiculous that that's supposed to be a qualification for political candidates in America, okay? If you're not ridiculously unwavering in your loyalty and support to Israel, well, you're gonna be a target. But let me continue. This triumph by a strong pro-Israel candidate represents a major victory for the Democratic mainstream that stands with the Jewish state, and a defeat for the extremist fringe. Calling Bowman part of an extremist fringe is laughable to say the least, especially coming from an organization that funds pro-Trump candidates, extremists on the right. I mean, these are individuals who have been funding the Republican Party. So the idea that they know what's good for the Democrats is hilarious to me. Now, still, Latimer claims that he was unaffected by all that money pouring in from AIPAC, and he downplayed their relevance and skirted questions about them. Here's an example of what I'm talking about.
This is, as we've been saying, the most expensive House primary in the history of this country. $25 million poured into this New York district, more than 14 million from AIPAC. What do you say to some of your constituents who are concerned about that kind of money pouring into politics in this way?
Well, the first thing I can say, Abby, is I've been in public office for 35 years. I've held a variety of positions. I've never once changed a position based on a campaign donation, ever. Nobody's ever accused me of that. What I know is that in winning this race tonight, I didn't win it on the national debate. I won it because I went door to door where I could all throughout this district, and I talked to people about the issues they wanted to talk about, which included what's happening in the Middle East, but really prioritized domestic issues.
That's nonsense. Okay, that had nothing to do with it. Clearly, the ads and the tens of millions of dollars that poured into this race had a lot to do with the fact that Latimer was able to defeat Bowman in this race. But I also want to be clear in stating that while I do believe that AIPAC money made the difference, Bowman was a vulnerable candidate for a number of reasons. First off, you have to remember that the district that Bowman had previously run in and won in had been redrawn. And so when that district was redrawn, it ended up including some of the wealthier people living in that area. And these are individuals who might not have been so warm to Bowman and might not have wanted to vote for him in the first place. So that made him vulnerable. There was also that whole fire alarm incident where he was caught lying about how he accidentally pulled the fire alarm. Video proved that that wasn't the case. I don't know how much of an impact that had on him, but there's a reason why AIPAC has decided to focus their resources on Bowman's race and Cori Bush's race. They saw the two as vulnerable progressive candidates who have been incredibly, or incumbents I should say, who have been incredibly critical of Israel. And so they've focused their energy on those two individuals. And so Cori Bush has not faced her primary election yet, but it is important to note that AIPAC is targeting her as well. Now let's get to some of the reactions coming from the Democrats and from the squad. Now, as you can imagine, the squad is not happy about this development. They're not happy about Bowman's defeat, but there are some disgraced Democrats like former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo who are elated by this, saying that they're congratulating Latimer. Tonight, middle school children who pull fire alarms and do it while denying rape as a weapon of war lost and progress won. I mean, real sweet of Cuomo to weigh in on things like sexual misconduct, considering the fact that he has multiple women, some who he worked with, accusing him of sexual misconduct. So maybe I would have sat that one out, but he couldn't help himself, of course. You can't be a real progressive if you don't make progress. Now we can. So that last statement I want to focus on for just a minute, because look, the idea that corporate Democrats are propelling this country in a progressive way or are leading Americans toward progress is laughable to me, to say the least. Okay, especially when you talk about corporate Democrats like Andrew freaking Cuomo, who decided to send sick elderly people back to nursing homes during the COVID pandemic, which led to the mass deaths of elderly people in nursing homes. Okay, that's what happened under Cuomo's watch, under his leadership. He's a giant piece of crap. But I also want to just note that when progressive voters fight for you and get you elected, you do have to deliver. And I think it's fair to say that voters in general have been kind of disappointed in the performance of members of the squad, of members of the Justice Democrats. Okay, there's been a lot of acquiescing to the mainstream Democratic Party when they were elected to push back against the Democratic Party in order to accomplish incredibly important economic policies that they purported to care about so much. A lot of them in the very beginning kind of fought for those policies, then they acquiesced to the Democratic Party and hyper-focused on culture war issues. And I suspect that's part of the reason why there wasn't really a high turnout when there was this rally for Jamaal Bowman this past weekend. AOC was there, Bernie Sanders was there. A couple hundred people showed up. That was not a good sign. Let's get to some more of the Democrats and how they responded to all of this. You have House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who also weighed in. His team was absolutely furious that a spokesperson for the Justice Democrats called him out, despite the fact that he did endorse Bowman. He says that the outcome of this election is a reflection on his leadership and whether Hakeem Jeffries stood up to Republican mega donors. He didn't like that statement, so Hakeem Jeffries shot back with his spokesperson saying the following. The so-called Justice Democrats stated back in 2017 that their goal was to destroy the Democratic Party, and they laughably threatened to primary Hakeem Jeffries. They have failed miserably in every way. Is anyone surprised? So that rift within the Democratic Party is still very much there, even after the Justice Democrats acquiesced to the corporate Democrats. So maybe some lessons can be learned here, but I doubt it. And a coalition of groups sent a letter on Wednesday demanding that Hakeem Jeffries take a more confrontational approach toward AIPAC. In the letter, more than a dozen progressive organizations said that they had dire concerns over the party's continued association with the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, the future of the Democratic Party, the future of our multiracial democracy, and the future of our planet. And they should be worried about that. In fact, all voters, regardless of their political affiliation, should be concerned about that. Because do we care about what's happening to Americans in our own country? Or are we more concerned about whether or not our politicians in Congress are loyal enough to a foreign government's country? I'm just asking that question. Because again, for the MAGA crowd out there who proudly declare themselves America first, are you really America first? Because America first would mean that you want your politicians to focus on this country first. AIPAC doesn't want that. AIPAC wants these politicians to focus on what's allegedly best for Israel first. And I find that pretty gross. We didn't elect Israel to be part of our country or to have sway over our policies, especially our foreign policy. But clearly, when you see the decisions that are made by leaders in both parties as it pertains to foreign policy in Israel, it's always favorable to Israel regardless of what Israel wants to do, even as they are overseeing the mass slaughter of innocent people in the Gaza Strip as we speak. Finally, let's pivot to some more cheery news today because one of the other surprising outcomes of the elections that took place yesterday was the congressional race for the 4th district in Colorado. So Lauren Boebert won. Didn't see that coming, right? The guy, like the woman who was groping her date during a Broadway show and vaping while doing so, by the way, like she got reelected because there's no justice in the world. There's really no justice in the world. She, of course, switched to a different district and she turns out that won. That effort was successful. I don't know why people would vote for her, but they did, and there you have it. We're gonna have another Lauren Boebert term to look forward to. I guess we have the Congress that we deserve.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.